First of all, I hope my hometown welcomed you all well in person here in Amsterdam. First time I've heard this event on the mainland of Europe in my city, Amsterdam. I'm joined here today with Eloise. By Eloise, we both represent firms active in the B2B fintech space. But interestingly enough, we are at very different growth phases. That's what we're going to talk about today. Similarities, differences, and we're really hoping you're going to leave with a bag full of tips and tricks in terms of optimizing your customer feedback. My name is Carlo. I work for Adyen. Adyen is a payments company. We process payments for the likes of eBay, Spotify, Netflix, Uber. And we offer financial services besides this. Think the in-store payments when you go do shopping on the high street, but also bank accounts, short-term cash advances, cards, wallets, all of those sorts. And at Adyen, my teams and I are responsible for any application that touches machine learning and the big data platform. And this is, of course, where data-driven customer feedback comes in. Eloise.
Yeah, hi, I'm Eloise. I work for Bud, which is a fintech based in London. And we build technology that allows companies to build more intelligent financial services. So whether that's lenders who are looking to make their processes more efficient or serve an underserved section of the market, or it might be companies who are building new ways, new experiences for people to manage their money and are looking to make those more personalized and intelligent. So I've been at Bud about 3 years, and I joined on the day they announced their Series A. So they raised about 20 million, had a big growth stage up to where we're at now, so Series B. I've been head of product for about 2 years. And I guess we kind of had the blessing and the curse of having our first customer as a really large enterprise bank, so it's HSBC. And what that means is you can build an enterprise product from the ground up, which is great for us now. We've got like really solid tech, security, machine learning. But in terms of customer feedback loops, we've had to really evolve that over the years as we've got more and more customers on board. And there are lots of challenges associated with that. And I know you've kind of gone through also a kind of big growth stage, a later stage in the company's growth, and that's changed a lot for you. So perhaps that's where to start. What has changed for you over the 5 years?
Very interestingly. We IPO'd 4 years ago, and the company's been around for quite a while. It has been founded by payments people. And the strategy has always been top-down. So very first customers were those big names. And those relationships are very deep. You have experts on the other side. And the world of payments is a world by itself. And feedback always happened qualitatively. Also because there were key people, developers, products, marketing, you name it. They were involved in that relationship. And they made sure that our product worked very well for just those customers. Because again, those customers is what keeps you alive as a company. I guess that's the phase you're in right now, right? You're optimizing for those very large customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of starting to think about, always thinking about what does this look like for the many. But, you've got some customers that you just can't lose, right?
Exactly.
So if you've got a customer saying we're going to leave unless you build this feature, product team's in a pretty difficult situation.
Exactly, and that balance is hard, right? And that's the next phase we're in right now. We're with those thousands of customers, you can't keep over-engineering for those customers only. And still, those strategic, we call them merchants, our customers will call it merchants, they are the driver of innovation. Right? The right relationships, they still help you to build for scale, but relationships have changed a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we found is kind of having those key partners and, has been really great. And you get a spectrum, right, of kind of big banks who operate in quite a sales-led way through to we work with quite a lot of kind of scale-up fintechs who are really, really excited about experimentation.
Sure.
But one of the things that I've found is you still need to be really, really conscious in B2B about how you experiment. So, for example, a team can build a really close relationship with a certain client who wants to move fast and is really helpful in giving feedback. They're a fintech who work in a similar way to us. But at some point, you might be working with a product team, and then a senior stakeholder in those organizations has a different perspective or kind of is cross about something. And suddenly that product team's, the way they're working has to change really fast, and they have to be really sensitive to that. Is that something you still kind of find is true?
It's true. And what comes to mind right now is forgiveness is very different right now for a mature business. When you're starting out, your very first customers, those very first relationships, you're going all in with the full company. The other party, counterparty, can feel this. And when things go wrong, it's okay because one, there's this direct line of communication. They're the first to know. And for us, it's very different. You have this established relationship. You have your name within your industry. There are certain expectations, and that changed the whole dynamic around feedback loops, but also our relationships in general.
Yeah, that's really interesting. In some ways, we're actually at the sweet spot now where we can kind of, we can move fast and people expect us to move fast and iterate. And, if something's not quite perfect,
Sure.
they understand that. But I found like earlier on, but still, we can share our roadmaps with them. They're expecting us to kind of lead the way.
Yeah.
Whereas earlier on, like particularly if you had a few kind of really big leading clients, you got in the tricky situation where they were requesting lots of features and it was harder to say, actually, we've got a really established roadmap and
Sure.
lots of other customers. It's much harder when you've got a few big clients to kind of say, well, we've got this roadmap. And they're like, yeah, but we expect you to, the reason we're working with you is because you're really agile and you can meet our needs quicker than we can do it internally.
Yeah, the thing I'm seeing often with enterprise customers is they are very much solution focused and not so much problem focused, which means it's really up to the team and product managers in general to really start digging, finding the right person on the other end. Because we're often dealing with account managers or there is some commercial element involved, but the actual users of your product, they're behind the scenes. And you need to reach that party first and actually dig towards the problem before you can make a true impact. And I see that often there's a bit of a mismatch in the very first steps of the relationship.
Yeah, for sure. And I found like when I joined Bud, the way I kind of did that was actually just by kind of building relationships internally in the organization as well, so that I could, like, the sales team would take me into meetings and then I could figure out if those are the right people, or like talk to the client and be like, oh, could you introduce me to this person? And it was kind of quite you could find your way through. And as we grow as a company as well now, I've got to have the tips and tricks to help product managers do that themselves. Sure.
Nice. And imagine you have to launch a new feature or a new product. How do you select your pilot customers, right? MVP, that stage. How do you select them?
Yeah, so I think it varies depending on which product and which stage they're at. So if it's really, really early stage, we might pick, a small scale startup who's kind of happy with a messier process. Sure. Once we've got quite a good idea of what the product is, we know what the MVP is, we're quite solid, we're quite confident it's got good market fit. That's when you might want to go with like a mid-tier or like a fintech kind of scale up, because they'll grow adoption very fast, but still keep feeding back. And then I guess like later stage, really like our scale really comes from enterprise. What
comes to mind is I listened to a very nice podcast 2 weeks ago. It was the CPO of Robinhood, I forgot her name, and she summarized product as the art of solving, scaling, and sustaining. And in that solving phase, you need a particular type of customer. I've heard Jolene, she's hopefully still here in the room, she talked about ambassadors before. And I find finding the right ambassador in this solve stage at the customer side, that's a true art. Finding someone at that side to almost pitch the product for you is extremely important, obviously, for the relationship. But think further along, this person's career can actually flourish as well. Because again, you're solving a problem for the customer. So if this person is the face of that solution at the customer side, there is benefit for both sides. And I've seen that the most successful products or large features launched in this very first stage, right? There's not much, there's this MVP. They have very much benefited from an ambassador-like person. And moreover, this person can, at some point, based on the relationship, very much advise on difficult themes. Think pricing, for example. Always a very difficult subject to talk about, whether there is already an existing pricing model or you have invented something entirely new. These are the type of people that, for any growth phase, right? I think that's the cool thing about it. They're extremely useful and helpful. But at the same time, you need to choose your customer well for it, because not everyone is open to that type of relationship. Do you reckon the same?
Yeah, absolutely. And that can be like a really exciting time when you find that good fit. But I think so much of that is about the wider relationship that you build with that organization, which kind of takes us on quite nicely to kind of another thing that we want to talk about around How do you build the right culture in your organization? Because this stuff doesn't happen in isolation. It's not product managers driving all of this. They're working and collaborating with commercial teams, legal, compliance teams, everyone who's kind of interacting with a client. What are some of the kind of tips and tricks you've used to build the right culture for customer feedback?
Meetings in person, obviously, but they're extremely valuable. For the first step, of course, is finding that right audience, right? Product managers, sure, need to get out there, meet customers, but it's really hard to find the actual people with the problem that you need to solve for. Secondly, bringing along teammates from a very different domain. Product designers, engineers, I always bring an engineer to this type of meetings. They'll bring in a different perspective. They'll remember different elements of the conversation. They're very useful. And I personally love, for UX-based, UI-based products, the power of Figma, for example. The fact that you can bring this lookalike prototype in front of a customer, and then you need to remember the art of being silent, right? You just need to sit there, really don't intervene, just let it happen. That's an extremely useful tool to start validating and getting customer feedback very qualitatively, quickly. And open questions and the techniques. We've all read those books around customer interviewing, right? Like they are in practice extremely useful. And I feel those relationships, right, making the customer feel special, feeling, owning the problem as well with you, co-designing it almost with you, taking them also along the technical complexity whatsoever. That is definitely an approach we always take, co-designing with our customers.
Yeah, definitely. We use Figma.
Maybe that's
Figma a lot.
The B2B space in general, right?
Yeah, for sure. And we often find actually that one of the things that actually has been quite transformational in terms of that culture has been running workshops with clients with commercial in there. So, taking design and product in and kind of doing a workshop that both gets value for the product team, but also helps the sales process because the client is more engaged. They kind of feel like you understand the problems they're trying to solve. And there's also an art to that, right? Going in with enough polish that they're confident that you're the people to work with and you know what you're doing. But also having enough space so you can explore those ideas.
And I guess that's where commercial also comes in, right? They have maybe sometimes a better sense around this.
Yeah.
Almost a form of product sense, like how far can we go? Where's the relationship right now?
Yeah.
Hey, and we talked a lot qualitative feedback, right? Being in the room, talking to customers, engaging with them. What about quantitative feedback?
So that's absolutely something where we have had a huge push over, the time that I've been at Bud around quantitative feedback. You can get away with a lot of qualitative stuff, particularly in a startup. Like a lot of those initial years is like founders just going out and doing hard graft to really understand customers and finding that product market fit. And really, particularly as we kind of grow in terms of number of people as well, and you get new product managers on board, they have to have the data there. And realistically, you can't put all of your product managers into, the meeting with all clients. So they need like a good repository. And one of the things that we're kind of looking at the moment is at what level do you, because we kind of want teams to be autonomous and just get on with delivering their impact, but what level do you kind of standardize these things? How visible do you need to make it across the organization so people can learn from each other, but also so there's like an accepted wisdom about how much data is enough, what balance of qualitative and quantitative you need, all of those things.
Yeah, sure. In our space, the very first advice towards product managers is any place within your solution, whether it's API-based or web-based, doesn't matter, try to implement logging together with your customers. The more, the better, because at some point it will be useful information. And I think, and I would love to get your perspective on this, again, given the different growth phases, you run the risk of having multiple truths for the same metrics. That's what happens, right? If every product manager has their own approach, and in our space there are certain success KPIs, metrics. We heard a lot about it today. Ben had a nice presentation about it. How to centralize analytics in such a way that you can still tailor it towards specific problems, specific customers, but at the same time you will develop a common truth around, look, if we're looking for feedback across our entire solution, these are the metrics. How's that going for you? Is that organized or is it still with each product manager?
Yeah, definitely. So it's a bit of a combination at both at the moment. So like certain product managers who work in certain areas like care more about certain metrics, but then we're trying to get more cross-team alignment around that. And one thing I found is that can actually happen with clients as well. So one of the things that we do is define really clearly what success metrics are with clients before we start working with them.
Yeah.
So they know what to expect, they know what you're tracking, and so that you're aligned in terms of expectations. Because the worst thing is, like, you know, you check in a month's time and they're like, we see this number, and you're like, oh, well, we care about this number. You know, you don't want to get in that situation.
That calibration is key indeed. Yeah. And especially also in our business, I mean, we're growing so fast. If a product manager leaves or has a different role, things need to move on. And having at least that common truth in terms of success metrics with your customers and sticking to it, and the other side also understands it, is indeed a very, very important piece. Nice. And what's next for Bud in terms of customer feedback and roadmap?
Yeah, so I mean, continuing, I kind of mentioned a few things about thinking about, you know, do we need, I tend to, you know, I don't want to put loads of processes in place. I want teams to move fast and be autonomous. But, like, you know, what level of standardization do we want in terms of the way that people share both their qualitative and quantitative data? You know, I've got instances where teams are doing really, really great work and moving fast, but no one else in the business knows about it. So, like, how do they present that and make sure they're communicating at the C-suite level? And particularly, one of the things that we found really effective in the last year or so is kind of having product councils where you kind of bring in, you write a pre-read before you go in with all of your evidence and data that you've collected. And that's really helped kind of efficiency of decisions and communication between, like, product managers and C-suite and kind of leadership.
Sure, cool. And do you see that certain teams very far along that road teach other teams also in the organization how to do this?
For sure, yeah, absolutely. But I think there are definitely things to do, particularly when we onboard new people, in terms of, like, the Bud way, so they can get up and running really quickly. Yeah,
sure. That brings me to a nice way. We talked about it. This is a nice example to share. What about bringing first-time product managers to customer meetings?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one because we talked a bit earlier about kind of building those relationships and going in and talking to customers, but obviously when a new product manager joins, like, part of it is about the trust within the organization as well. Like, you know, can you just put the person straight in front of a client? Possibly not. So still there's, you know, sometimes it makes sense to, you know, maybe for me to go into that meeting too and lead it so they can kind of learn how to get that balance right between kind of talking about the product, but also getting the insight. So finding, like, scalable ways to do that as well is really important for us.
There are lots of soft skills involved, right? I think in general, this whole product sense, again, the art of being silent, but also asking the right questions, trying to read body language when again, dealing with the other side. These are skills that you need to develop, and sometimes it makes sense to go with a group or with someone that's experienced with it. It's definitely something that needs a bit more attention, because sometimes, you know, startup mentality, just go out there, it can also damage the relationship a little bit.
For sure. And they need to, you know, people need to build their authority and their leadership within the company. So, you know, it gets to a point where commercial, I think it's a no-brainer to bring you into this meeting. Like, I want you to have you there, and that's really the great place to be.
Yeah, and the dynamics with commercial, right? I think it's up to product managers to be extremely strict around expectations in terms of setting the agenda, right? Of course, commercial should help and they should sense what's going on. Are there any sensitivities around pricing or the relationship in general? But product should lead it. And general rule is customers never have time. So writing an email, summarizing the meeting, whatever happened, sending it towards your customer, and the art of writing it in such a way that they can forward it. I think that's a very important part, because again, the relationship is not just with that person that has full context on what happened. You just have to assume this person will forward it to their team, to their lead, to whatsoever. And I think that's where product can really play a very important role in finding that balance in, you know, what are the core things I want to communicate towards my customer, but at the same time, what do I still need out of this relationship to bring this feature or product to the next level?
For sure. I've noticed a few questions coming up, and there's a top one there that I think we should talk about. So I'm talking about the loop aspect in the discussion. So we talked a little bit about kind of teams presenting back, and but could you talk a bit about how you disseminate that feedback and how teams apply it and close that loop?
Yeah. There's an important culture part in here, right? You have your senior product leaders that have spent significant time with the company, and they have this intangible feedback around the products. They know how to position our solution and our products within, you know, compared to competitors. What are behind the scenes, the disadvantages and the true advantages? That's definitely something that needs to be shared in a very internal environment where retros, but also vision. I think we had a very nice session on vision and strategy. Those are the perfect venues to bring that feedback back to the table. Often, you know, in successful growth companies, there is this vibe around we have already won, and it's up to these leaders that have been around for a long time to keep stressing and keep bringing that feedback loop back. Like, hey guys, true, we've launched very, very cool things, but there are these and these and these parts where we still have to improve our offering, and we have not built the right offering for this specific segment or this specific industry. And in terms of data, because that's, I think, where the loop thing comes in, right? It's trying to have, and that's why I asked you, like, our teams teaching each other lots of things they can piggyback on top of each other. I think, identifying metrics, KPIs, that's stuff that other teams can also use. And often there are already foundations, technical foundations, or product discovery foundations that they should use. And that, for me, closes the loop as well, and how to, have a collective database or research set whatsoever on that customer feedback.
Yeah, definitely. I think on the first point, some of the things that I've kind of observed are more or less effective are sometimes teams are so immersed in their area or the feedback that they've got, and they're kind of discussing a lot with the team, and it's informing their product decisions. One of the things that's really important is to make sure that the organization is really clear on the top insights and how it's informed the product, and to make that as succinct as possible and repeat it a lot of times. Because it might be that your senior stakeholder didn't turn up to the design crit or hasn't read that Slack post. Yeah. So really, you can't underestimate how many times you have to keep telling that story and telling that narrative of, these are the things we've learned from customers. This is what we're doing. And there are some easy cases of a client requested feature, we think it's a good feature to build. But for those more like ephemeral insights of, like, we've seen this across the customer base, or we think this is strategically important, that's a really hard thing to actually do well. Yeah. And that's the way that you get people's confidence and buy-in to that kind of customer feedback, I think. Yes. How do you ensure roadmap transparency with the customers? So we talked briefly about kind of setting out a roadmap for customers, but that good old favorite of what happens if they hold you to account for a roadmap. We as product managers know a roadmap is not a commitment, but not every organization understands that. It's very hard. I don't think there's a silver bullet answer to this, right? For us, in our growth phase, it's all about scale, building a solution that works for everyone. That sometimes results in delays, because again, we have to make a priority around what are the features we want to launch. Being very close to the merchants, that's the terminology I use, to our customers. And having commercial people involved in that relationship very much helps, because again, they can help you manage those expectations, and can also advise product on, this is the merchant where it's perfectly fine to share the full roadmap, because they understand, they have the same culture, they understand that things go wrong or things are not going according to planning. And this is where, a bit of product sense also helps. What are the parties where you should share what? I think that's a true skill. Yeah, definitely. And you always know the clients who are going to be more or less likely to hold you to a date, or see that as, a waterfall delivery plan. Exactly. And for example, going back to those 3 steps, right? The solve, scale, sustain. In the sustain phase for a product, those are the perfect customers. Very demanding, very detailed. Then it's definitely useful to share a specific part of the roadmap on something you're very comfortable with them, because they will challenge the comfortable stuff that you've already built. For sure. And I think one thing that's like a practical tool that we've used is you might have to, at some point, define a fixed delivery date. So just be careful what you define and make sure that's like a strong commitment. It's something in the near term. Don't say in 6 months' time you'll have this very detailed list of features, but give the client something. And make it clear that, yes, you will have this in your hands by this point. These are our longer term, this is our longer term vision, and these are some of the things that you might see coming out. So they've got something to take to their internal stakeholders as well, and say, we've got commitment that this thing will happen by this date. Because the reality is often they'll need that to get whatever they're trying to get done. In general, right? If you have the luxury, don't commit to super long timelines. I think that is, the answer here. Great. So with whom should customer insights and feedback sit? Within product marketing or with customer success? It's a very good question. It very much depends, I think, on how your product organization is structured. In Adyen, we have this sitting with product marketing. They're extremely close to the product organization, and they are one of the sources of customer feedback.
again, customer success, we are in the B2B space, so those relations are very deep. You have often very few customers, but very intense, sticky solutions with them. I think there it's better to have this all sitting with the product team in whatever form it is, and not with the customer success team. That's at least my opinion. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a mix. I think it has to kind of filter through everywhere. And actually, I think people have to be aligned on what customer feedback is coming through and what we're doing with it, because there's people on the front line who are responding to this feedback, who are saying, this is how we've taken your feedback into account. And equally, you've got a product team who need that feedback to develop the best product that they can. So, and also, I suppose, for different types of feedback, quantitative feedback, that's often the product team collecting it and then reporting back, whereas qualitative is more likely to come the other way. So it's a bit of a mix. And also, I think we're talking about this in quite a structured way, but in reality, feedback comes from all different types of places, and it's quite like, it's quite a big, messy space often. It's rare that it comes in neat packages.
And feedback on the relationship in general, right, I think is with product customer success or whatever front-end facing teams.
Yeah.
Let's see.
We've done that one. What do you do with feedback which isn't aligned to your product vision? Excellent question. That's what product managers are for, I guess.
Yeah, this is very difficult. It's the art of sticking to your own vision, right? You've done your research, you've gone through your planning, you have engaged with customers to get to that specific vision. You can't keep changing that roadmap. But again, it's if that feedback is valuable in terms of testing it with others, right? You can discuss this first of all within the teams, but sticking to a vision and again prioritizing, right? I think everyone here has 1,000 things on the list, but can only do 10. This is an example of it. I think these things will always happen, and at some point it is important to stick to strategy, but just be flexible enough that whenever there are multiple parties involved, you're deviating a little bit. But going, and immediately overhauling it, I don't think that's a sustainable strategy for a product team.
Yeah, definitely not sustainable if you're overhauling your whole roadmap. If it's a really small thing and it makes a big strategic impact with a massive client, you might just put it on your roadmap and that's fine. And I think teams should know that's fine as well. I think there's some sort of balance you get across, like if you look at your roadmap for the quarter, there's some sort of balance between, the type of work that's going to retain existing clients, the type of work that's, going towards your longer term strategic goals, and things like, all the work you've got around performance or tech debt or kind of other things that you want to do to make your product resilient and robust.
Which is in hindsight, right? This friction feedback that isn't aligned, that's the most beautiful feedback in the end, I guess.
Yeah.
Whether you're going to do something with it or not.
Yeah, I suppose so. And actually, I think that's another real skill about product management. It's like, I quite like the phrase strong opinions loosely held. That sometimes you do have to pivot in your thought as a product manager. You're like, no, I had this vision. And then you start to hear these things and you're like, okay, well, this doesn't align. Why doesn't it align? And asking those questions about why is this so at odds with my roadmap is a really good question to ask.
Probably time for about one more, guys.
Great.
Last one. How much do you share your insights with customers versus use them to plan internally?
That's a good question. So a lot of the time we're using them to plan, using them internally, but I'm trying to think of examples where we might share them with customers. So I'm not sure about sharing across customers, actually. We might say kind of, this is what we have learned.
I think so. I think lots of customers in our space, they are looking for that expert advice. So getting feedback from us as in, this is what we've learned with other customers. And again, you don't necessarily need to project it on your business, but this is just stuff that we've noted. I think that feedback is, again, feedback to the other side, right, is always appreciated. So I definitely think that sharing insights with customers, but again, the right ones, right? Remember the ambassador story, customers that are flexible enough to understand is not your roadmap immediately. I guess that's where you can actually, build a much stronger relationship and even have them responding towards that feedback and see if it's truly something.
Yeah, I think the place that happens right now is quite a lot with the commercial teams who are working directly with clients. They'll say, other clients have found this is a great way to use this technology, or that kind of feedback. And then I suppose in those kind of workshops, I suppose a lot of our technology companies haven't used before. It's quite new to them. So that kind of in a workshop situation where you're saying, these are the things we have seen, and these are your options, and try and validate that way.
Yeah.
But again, kind of going in with expertise. Rather
Expertise.
than going in just with completely open questions.
Product manager experts. And that brings us to the closing note. Michael. All
Absolutely.
yours.
Yeah. Can we thank Carlo and Eloise again?